Alright, this is episode 2 of Notebook Nuggets, a series where I go through some personal growth type insights that I've came across throughout the past week. Today I've got 5 nuggets, and to start off with number 1. So this is an idea that I came across listening to a Tim Ferriss podcast. He had a guy called Martha Beck on, and she was talking about how she made a pledge to herself to not tell a lie for a full year, and this resulted in her getting divorced and leaving her religion and improving her life. But it wasn't just about not telling classic lies, it was about not lying to herself. For example, if someone asked her how she was doing, she wouldn't say, "Good, I'm alright." She would honestly say how she felt. In other words, it wasn't just about avoiding lies, it was about being more truthful and saying what she actually thought. This idea of just setting yourself a goal of not lying to people and not lying to yourself could be a really useful thing to try out. I feel like a lot of us use these shadow type questions where we kind of gesture in the direction to the thing we want to say without just directly saying it. So I came across this next thing in an article. I don't speak Spanish. That's because when I grew up, no one around me spoke any Spanish. For the same reason, by the time I was a young adult, I still don't know anything about my emotions or how to deal with them. So that was a quote from an article that I seen. And yeah, I just don't think you should expect to be good at something if you haven't been working on it or you didn't grow up with certain foundations. Let's say you grew up in an obese family, everyone was fat. In that situation, not many people around you are going to be speaking about health related stuff. The language of eating clean and exercising just won't be in your mindset. And so yeah, the I don't speak Spanish thing was a nice way of understanding that. Speaking of Spanish, I was actually teaching my 4-year-old cousin some basic words in Spanish the other day, and he just couldn't get the word please. And I know he's young, he's only 4, but that's poor for 4. Alright, next insight. I just finished reading Man's Search for Meaning, and I'm not going to go through everything, but just one of the things that stood out was you shouldn't pity old people for not having much time left, you should envy them. Sure, they don't have many possibilities for the future, but they do have the realities of the past, the meaning they fulfilled and the values they lived by. So I just finished listening to Huberman's 6-part series on sleep with Matthew Walker. And again, I took a lot of notes in this. I'm not going to go through all of them. I think the standout thing was the idea that you wouldn't sit at the dinner table waiting to get hungry, so why would you lie in bed waiting to get sleepy? For me, I'm someone who can lie in bed before going to sleep and still get good sleep, but I know that is something that could be useful to a lot of people. But even when you wake up during the middle of the night, getting up and getting out of bed for a little while could be better than lying in bed trying to fall asleep. So that's something to give a go if you're someone who wakes up and can't fall back to sleep. The final nugget for today's video, the note is called What Books You Should Buy. And this is something I came across from a guy called Oliver Burkeman. He's got a book called 4,000 Weeks, and this is what I wrote. Now, this isn't true all the time, but the pieces of advice that you cringe at and avoid tend to be the advice that you need the most. Self-help books don't tend to be marketed at people who won't buy them. Because who wants to buy a book filled with harsh truths around how they could be doing better? There's also a huge male-female part to this. All the female self-help books tend to be focused on emotions and feelings, and male self-help books tend to be focused on purpose and taking action, which is great, but both genders could probably benefit from reading each other's books. Alright, there we have it. In this episode, we talked about setting yourself a target of not lying and not lying to yourself. We talked about how some of the skills or mindsets you lack right now could just be because you didn't grow up in an environment that aided those skills. We spoke about how we should really envy old people. I touched on a little thing you can do to maybe improve your sleep. And then at the end, I touched on how people could benefit from reading books that they tend to avoid. So there we go, that's episode 2 done, and